What is that smell? Oh, just two dirty street rats crawling in from the gutter.
Gerald Whitmore didn't even look up from his steak. Talia Fletcher, 19 years old, swallowed hard.
Sir, we haven't eaten since yesterday. If you'd let us sing one song for a plate of food...
Gerald's fork hit the plate.
Sing for food?
Tables laughed. Talia's eyes burned, but she didn't blink. Gerald leaned forward.
People like you don't belong here. Take that crusty notebook and go howl on a sidewalk.
Tobias, her twin, stood behind her. 19, skinny, silent, clutching that notebook like a shield. 40 people watched. Not one spoke. What Gerald did not know was that in less than 4 minutes, he'd be sitting in dead silence, while the entire room stood for the two kids he just called street rats. Colton's Grill sat on the corner of Carey Street in Richmond, Virginia. White tablecloths, dim lighting, jazz on the speakers most Friday nights. Average entree, $35. The kind of place where people came to feel important. Tonight, the place was packed. Every table full, the bar 3 deep. And at table 4, the same table he'd claimed every Friday for 6 years, Gerald Whitmore held court like a man who owned the room. He didn't own it, but he owned the building it sat in. And in Gerald's world, that was close enough. Gerald was the kind of man who tipped big and talked loud. 56 years old, real estate money, 3 commercial properties on this block alone. Staff smiled when he walked in, not because they liked him, because Brenda Sullivan, the general manager, made it very clear. Gerald Whitmore gets whatever Gerald Whitmore wants, no exceptions. Brenda ran Colton's Grill the way Gerald liked it. Clean, quiet, comfortable. And comfortable had a meaning in this restaurant that nobody said out loud, but everybody understood. If you didn't look like you belonged, Brenda made sure you didn't stay. Tonight was supposed to be a normal Friday. Steaks, wine, Gerald telling stories about his latest property deal while diners at the neighboring tables pretended to be impressed. Then Talia and Tobias Fletcher walked through the front door. They hadn't planned on Colton's Grill. They'd tried 2 other restaurants first, a barbecue spot on Main Street. The owner told them to leave before Talia could finish her sentence. A diner on Broad. The hostess wouldn't even make eye contact. Colton's was the 3rd stop, the last try before giving up for the night and walking back to Pastor Edwin Brooks's shelter with nothing in their stomachs. Pastor Brooks had taken them in 9 months ago. Small shelter off Hull Street, 14 beds, a roof that leaked when it rained hard. But it was warm, and Brooks never once made them feel like charity cases. He was the first adult in a long time who looked at them and didn't see a problem. He saw something else. Every morning before the other residents woke up, Talia and Tobias would sit in the shelter's back hallway and sing. Quietly at first, hymns their mother taught them. Then louder, harmonies that echoed off the cinder block walls and made people stop in the corridor just to listen. Brooks told them once, "Your mama gave you those voices for a reason. Don't you dare let the world take that from you." Their mama, Denise Fletcher, backup singer, gospel circuits across the South, small churches, smaller paychecks. She never got a record deal, never got her name on an album, but she could sing in a way that made strangers cry in the 3rd row of a Wednesday night service. She raised the twins alone in Norfolk. No father in the picture, no family with money. Just Denise and 2 kids and a leather notebook she carried everywhere, filled with songs she wrote on bus rides between gigs. Melodies she hummed to Talia and Tobias every single night before bed. 14 months ago, Denise caught pneumonia. No health insurance. By the time she got to a hospital, her lungs were already shutting down. She died on a Tuesday afternoon. Talia was holding her left hand. Tobias was holding her right. She was 41 years old. After that, everything collapsed. Eviction within 60 days. No relatives willing to take in 2 black teenagers with nothing to offer. The foster system at 18 was a dead end nobody even pretended to care about. Within 3 months, Talia and Tobias were sleeping in a bus station. The only thing they kept was the notebook. Every song their mother ever wrote, every melody, every lyric. Denise Fletcher's entire life as a musician, sealed in cracked leather and held together with a rubber band. Tobias carried it everywhere. He never let it out of his sight, not once. Talia asked him once why he held it so tight. He looked at her and said, "Because it's the only part of her that still has a voice." Now they stood in the entrance of Colton's Grill, hungry, embarrassed, and surrounded by people who had just laughed at them. Brenda Sullivan was already walking toward them. Behind her, Gerald was still grinning, soaking in the applause of his own cruelty. But there was one person in the room who wasn't laughing. Corner booth. Alone. A black man in his mid-40s, dressed simply, jeans, dark blazer, no flash. He had been reading the menu when the twins walked in. Now the menu was flat on the table, and his eyes hadn't left the two kids standing in the doorway. His name was Dominic Calloway, Grammy-nominated music producer, 3 platinum records, 2 nominations in the last 4 years, based in Atlanta. But once a year, every year, he drove to Richmond and ate alone at Colton's Grill. Always the same booth, always a Friday in October. 6 years ago, his daughter used to sit across from him in that booth. She was 17. She loved to sing. She died in a car accident 3 days after her senior prom. This restaurant was their spot. Dominic watched Gerald humiliate the twins. He watched Brenda march toward them. He watched the room laugh. He didn't say a word, not yet, but he put down his menu, and he leaned forward. Brenda Sullivan stopped 3 feet from the twins and crossed her arms. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her tone did all the work. "I'm going to say this once. You have 10 seconds to walk out that door or I'm calling the police." Talia opened her mouth, but Gerald's voice cut across the room first. "What part of get out is confusing for them, Brenda? Must be a comprehension issue. Probably never finished school either." More laughter, softer this time. A few people looked away, but nobody spoke up. Then Tobias did something nobody expected. He stepped forward, past his sister, past the hostess stand, and spoke directly to Brenda. Quiet, steady, no anger, no begging. "Ma'am, we haven't eaten since yesterday morning. We're not asking for charity. We're offering something. One song, just one. If nobody likes it, we'll walk out and never come back." The room went still for half a second. Something in his voice caught people off guard. Not the words, the dignity behind them. Brenda hesitated, just barely. A crack in the armor. Gerald killed it. "Oh, for God's sake, Brenda, I didn't come here to listen to 2 homeless kids audition. Get them out of my sight." Brenda's face hardened. She reached for her phone. That's when the crash came. Hannah Moore, 22, newest waitress on staff, carrying a full tray of plates to table 6. Loss of balance. Porcelain hit tile. Glass shattered. Every head in the restaurant snapped toward the noise. In the chaos, Hannah leaned close to Talia's ear and whispered 4 words. "Stage mic's still on." The jazz musician had canceled tonight. The small stage in the corner was empty. The mic was still set up from last week's performance. Still plugged in. Still live. Talia looked at her brother. Tobias looked down at the notebook. He flipped it open to a page near the middle. A page with their mother's handwriting. He nodded. They didn't run. They walked. Calm, steady, straight to the stage. Nobody noticed. Gerald was laughing at the mess. Brenda was on her knees picking up broken plates. The entire room was looking the wrong way. Then Tobias leaned into the microphone and hummed. One note, low, deep. So deep it didn't just fill the room, it vibrated through the floor. The hum hung in the air like smoke, low, warm, trembling. It reached the back tables before anyone realized where it was coming from. Talia stood beside her brother on that tiny stage. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. She could feel every pair of eyes in the room starting to turn. She could feel Gerald's stare burning through the crowd. She could feel Brenda somewhere behind her, already reaching for a phone. She had maybe 90 seconds, maybe less. Her mind went to every street corner, every subway platform, every church parking lot where she and Tobias had stood with nothing but their voices and an open hand. She'd been laughed at more times than she could count, told to shut up, told to move along, told that nobody wanted to hear it. Every single time she sang anyway. Not because she was brave, because of what her mother told her the night before she died. The voice doesn't belong to you, baby. It belongs to whoever needs to hear it. Talia looked at Tobias. His eyes were already closed. The notebook was open on the music stand, a page near the middle. Their mother's handwriting, small and slanted. The title at the top read, Still Here, written by Denise Fletcher, 2019. She wrote it on a Greyhound bus coming home from a gospel gig in Macon, Georgia. She never performed it. Not once. Tonight would be the first time anyone heard it. Tobias's hum grew. Not louder, deeper. It wasn't a performance. It was a prayer. The kind of sound that starts in the chest and doesn't ask for permission. A woman at the nearest table put her fork down. A man at the bar turned slowly on his stool. Talia wrapped her fingers around the microphone. She didn't adjust it. She leaned in close, the same way her mother used to lean into every mic she ever touched, like she was about to tell it a secret. She took one breath, closed her eyes, and began. The first note that came out of Talia Fletcher's mouth was not loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't shake the walls or rattle the glasses. It was quiet, almost a whisper. The kind of note that sneaks under the noise of a room and wraps itself around your chest before you realize it's there. A woman at table 9 stopped mid-sentence. She didn't finish her thought. She just turned her head toward the stage and forgot what she was saying. Then the note grew. Talia's voice opened up like a door that had been locked for years. Soprano, clear, effortless, but carrying something underneath, something heavy, something old. Something that didn't belong in the throat of a 19-year-old girl who hadn't eaten in 2 days. Tobias held the foundation beneath her. His hum had become a bass line, low, rhythmic, steady as a heartbeat. Not a harmony you learn in a classroom, the kind of harmony that only happens between two people who shared a womb. Instinctive, cellular, as if they were breathing with the same set of lungs. The song was Still Here. Their mother wrote it on a bus. She never played it for a crowd. She never recorded it. She hummed it to the twins on nights when the rent was late and the heat was off, and she had nothing to give them except her voice. Now her children were giving it to a room full of strangers who, 30 seconds ago, had laughed at them. 15 seconds in, the bartender stopped pouring. Mid-glass, whiskey ran over the rim and pooled on the counter. He didn't notice. 30 seconds in, conversations died. Not slowly, all at once, like someone had pressed mute on the entire restaurant. Forks went down, phones came out, not to text, to record. 45 seconds in, a woman at table 9 pressed her hand over her mouth. Her husband reached for her arm. She shook her head. She wasn't upset. She was overwhelmed. The lyrics didn't explain pain, they showed it. Rain on a church roof at midnight. A door that keeps closing no matter how many times you knock. Hands that keep reaching even when there's nothing to hold on to. And through all of it, a voice that refuses to stop. Still here, still standing, still here. Talia sang it like she meant it, because she did. Tobias dropped into a sub-bass note on the chorus that had no business coming from a 19-year-old kid. The vibration traveled through the stage, through the floor, into the legs of every chair in the front row. A glass on table 3 trembled against its saucer. Their voices braided together on the second verse. Talia rising, Tobias falling, then meeting in the middle on a major chord so clean, so perfectly locked, that it sounded like one voice split in two. A man at the bar turned all the way around on his stool. He'd been facing the TV. Now the TV didn't exist. At table 12, a white-haired woman set down her reading glasses and leaned forward. Her name was Lorraine Adams, 68 years old, retired vocal coach. 30 years at Virginia Commonwealth University. She had trained hundreds of singers, Opera, jazz, gospel, pop. She knew what raw talent sounded like. And right now, her hands were gripping the edge of the table. At the corner booth, Dominic Calloway had stopped breathing. He had been reaching for his water glass when Talia's voice hit the second verse. His hand froze. The glass stayed on the table. His other hand was still holding a fork, a bite of steak halfway to his mouth. The fork slipped. It clattered against the plate, loud enough for the table next to him to glance over. Dominic didn't pick it up. He didn't move. His eyes were locked on the stage. Locked on two teenagers who were producing a sound he hadn't heard in 23 years in the music industry. Then he reached for his phone. He didn't open the camera. He didn't hit record. He scrolled to a contact, pressed call, and said 5 words so quietly that only the empty seat across from him could have heard. "Get the contract ready. Tonight." He hung up, put the phone face down on the table, and went back to listening. 1 minute in. Then 2. The song built like weather. The verses were rain, steady, insistent, soaking into everything. The chorus was thunder, Talia's voice cracking open the sky while Tobias held the ground beneath it. People weren't just listening anymore. They were leaning in, bodies tilting toward the stage like plants toward sunlight. A teenager at table 5 had tears running down both cheeks and didn't bother wiping them. Gerald Whitmore was not leaning in. He sat rigid at table 4, fork down, jaw tight. His fingers were wrapped around his scotch glass so hard the ice was shaking. He wasn't moved. He was furious. 3 minutes ago, this room belonged to him. Every laugh, every glance, every whispered compliment about his new property deal, all his. Now every single set of eyes was pointed at 2 homeless kids on a stage that wasn't even supposed to be in use tonight. He leaned sideways toward Brenda Sullivan, who was standing frozen behind the bar with a cracked plate still in her hand. Gerald whispered something. Brenda's eyes widened. She looked at him, then at the stage, then back at Gerald. She nodded and started moving toward the sound system panel. But nobody in the audience noticed, because the song was reaching its first crescendo. Talia's voice climbed, one note, then another, each one higher and more open than the last. Tobias dropped to his lowest register, a rumble you felt more than heard. The harmony resolved into a major chord that cracked the room wide open. Then silence. 2 full seconds of absolute silence. No coughing, no silverware, no ice in glasses, nothing. Then applause. Not polite applause, not the quiet golf clap of a fine dining room. This was the kind of applause that comes from being ambushed, the kind that bursts out of people before they can stop it. Hands hitting together hard. A man at the bar saying, "Oh my God," under his breath. The teenager at table 5 standing up. Dominic Calloway was already on his feet. Lorraine Adams was gripping the table with both hands, mouth slightly open, shaking her head like she'd just seen something she couldn't explain. And behind the bar, Brenda Sullivan's hand was resting on the master switch of the sound system. Waiting. From the kitchen pass-through, Hannah Moore watched everything. Her apron was still stained from the tray she dropped. Her hands were steady now, and in her right hand, barely visible below the counter, her phone screen glowed. She wasn't recording the performance. She was recording something else entirely. The applause was still rolling when Talia leaned into the mic again. She closed her eyes. Tobias turned the notebook to the next page. The second verse of Still Here, the quiet verse, the one their mother used to sing so softly that the twins had to hold their breath to hear it. Talia opened her mouth. The first line came out like silk, thin, fragile, a thread of sound so delicate that the entire room leaned forward to catch it. That's when the speakers died. A hard click, then nothing. The mic went cold in Talia's hand. The warm hum of the sound system vanished. The room dropped into a hollow, ringing silence, the kind that makes your ears adjust. Talia's voice, unprotected, cracked. The note broke in half. She stumbled. Her mouth stayed open, but nothing came out. For one terrible second, she looked like exactly what Gerald Whitmore had called her, a scared, homeless kid who didn't belong here. Behind the bar, Brenda Sullivan pulled her hand away from the master switch. She didn't look at the twins. She looked at Gerald. Gerald gave a small nod. The kind of nod a man gives when his order has been filled correctly. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone at the bar said, "What happened?" A woman near the window turned to her husband. "Did the power go out?" It didn't go out, it was pulled. Gerald leaned back in his chair and picked up his scotch. Order restored. The room was his again. Two street kids had their little moment, and now it was over. Except Tobias Fletcher hadn't stopped. The moment the speakers cut, the moment his sister's voice cracked and the room went dead, Tobias did something that nobody in that restaurant was prepared for. He started beating his chest. Not hard, not dramatic. A rhythm, steady. One hand flat against his sternum, the other slapping his thigh. A heartbeat pattern. Then his mouth opened. Not to sing, to beatbox. A low, percussive pulse that came from somewhere deep in his throat. Kicks and snares and breath, layered together in a pattern that sounded like a drum kit built from nothing but bone and air. It filled the silence like a fist filling a glove. Talia heard it. Her eyes were still closed. Her hands were still shaking. The crack in her voice was still there, hanging in the air like a wound. 3 seconds passed. Then she opened her mouth again. No microphone, no speakers, no amplification. Just her voice, raw and naked, hitting the air without a single thing between it and the 40 people staring at her. And it was louder, not strained, not forced, fuller. The kind of volume that doesn't come from pushing harder, it comes from letting go. From a place underneath technique, underneath training, underneath everything a vocal coach could teach you. The kind of power that only exists in a voice that has been through something real. Talia Fletcher was not performing anymore. She was surviving. Out loud, in front of everyone. The room went quieter than before. Quieter than when the mic was on. Because now there was nothing between the twins and the audience. No equipment, no barrier, no safety net. Just two kids from nowhere standing on a stage that wasn't theirs, singing like their lives depended on it. Because their lives did depend on it. Tobias's beatbox locked in behind his sister's voice like a shadow finding its body. His rhythm was the ground. Her melody was the sky. Together they rebuilt the song from scratch, raw, stripped, and somehow 10 times more powerful than it had been 30 seconds ago. A man at the bar stood up. Not to clap, just to see them better. A woman at table 6 grabbed her husband's arm without looking at him. Phones came up again, more this time. Recording, streaming. The little red lights of live feeds blinking in the dark. Behind the bar, Brenda Sullivan stood frozen. Her hand was still near the switch. She had done what Gerald asked. She had killed the music. And the music came back louder. From the kitchen pass-through, Hannah Moore was still recording. Her phone aimed steady, not at the stage, at Gerald's face, at Brenda's hand on the switch, at the moment that was about to become evidence. She didn't know it yet, but that phone was going to change everything. The a cappella version of Still Here hit its final chorus, and the room stopped pretending it wasn't affected. Talia and Tobias had turned toward each other, not facing the crowd anymore, facing each other. The way they used to sing in the back hallway of Pastor Brooks's shelter at 5 in the morning when they thought nobody was listening. Tobias carried the low end, a bass so deep it didn't sound human. It sounded geological, like something rumbling beneath the floor of a cathedral. You didn't hear it in your ears, you felt it in your sternum. Talia carried the top. Her voice had found something after the crack, something that wasn't there before the speakers died. The crack hadn't broken her. It had broken something open inside her, and what came out was bigger than anything a microphone could have held. They hit the final chorus together. Same words, same breath, same moment. Still here, still standing, still here. Not harmony this time. Unison. One note, two voices. Identical pitch, identical weight, identical fire. The kind of sound that only twins can make. Two instruments built from the same blueprint, vibrating at exactly the same frequency. The note held. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then silence. 1 second of nothing. Then a chair scraped. A man at table 8 stood up. Then the woman next to him. Then 3 people at the bar. Then Lorraine Adams, gripping the edge of her table, rising slowly like she was standing in church. The applause didn't build. It detonated. Not the startled burst from before. This was earned. This was a room full of people who had just watched 2 homeless teenagers get sabotaged and come back stronger. Someone shouted. Someone whistled. The teenager at table 5 was sobbing openly and didn't care who saw. Half the restaurant was on its feet. Dominic Calloway was already standing. He'd been standing since the beatbox started. Now he stepped away from his booth, phone to his ear, and turned toward the wall so nobody could read his lips. "It's me again. I wasn't exaggerating. These 2 are the real thing." A pause. "I don't care what time it is. Get the paperwork moving. I'm not leaving this building without them." He hung up, slid the phone into his jacket, and looked at the twins with an expression that only a man who had spent 2 decades searching for something would recognize in himself. He had found it. At table 4, Gerald Whitmore was not standing. He was not clapping. His scotch was untouched. His face was the color of a man whose kingdom just got stolen in front of his eyes. He looked at Brenda. Brenda looked at the floor. The room didn't belong to Gerald anymore, and every single person in it knew it. Gerald pulled out his phone and typed 2 words to his son, Craig. "Get here." The applause was still echoing when Gerald Whitmore stood up. He didn't clap. He straightened his tie, buttoned his jacket, and addressed the room like a man calling a board meeting to order. "All right, that's enough." The clapping faded. Not because people wanted to stop, because Gerald's voice had a weight to it, the weight of a man who owned the building they were sitting in. "This is a restaurant, not a talent show, not a homeless shelter, not a charity concert." He turned to Brenda. "I thought we had an understanding." Brenda's face was pale. She stepped forward, hands clasped, trying to find a version of this that didn't end with her losing her job. "Mr. Whitmore, I tried to—" "You tried," Gerald cut her off, "and failed. So let me make this simple." He pulled out his phone and held it up like a weapon. "Either they leave right now, or I make 1 call and this place loses its lease by Monday morning. Your choice." It wasn't a bluff. Gerald's real estate firm held the commercial lease for Colton's Grill. 1 signature and the restaurant was done. Brenda knew it. The staff knew it. Even some of the regulars at the bar knew it. Brenda walked toward the twins. Her voice was low, almost apologetic, but her words weren't. "I'm sorry. You need to leave now. I'm calling the police." She dialed, told the dispatcher there were 2 trespassers refusing to leave the premises, gave the address, hung up. Talia looked at Tobias. Tobias looked at the notebook in his hands. They didn't move. Gerald wasn't finished. He had seen the way Dominic Calloway looked at the twins. He had seen the man stand during the performance. He had watched him make a phone call. Gerald didn't know who Dominic was, but he knew the man was a problem. He walked to the corner booth, stood over Dominic's table, looked down at him. "I don't know who you are, friend, but I know everybody in this city. Whatever business you think you have here tonight, it'd be a real shame if it got complicated." Dominic looked up at Gerald, calm, unhurried, the way a man looks at a mosquito buzzing near his ear. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, set it on the table, slid it toward Gerald with 1 finger. "Dominic Calloway, Calloway Sound Records. 3 platinum albums last year, 2 Grammy nominations. I don't have business in this city, Mr. Whitmore." He paused. "I have business everywhere, and right now my business is those 2 kids." Gerald picked up the card, read it. His smirk cracked, just barely. Just enough for Dominic to see. For the first time all night, Gerald Whitmore was standing in front of someone whose power wasn't local. Wasn't about property or leases or Friday night tables. Dominic Calloway operated in a world Gerald couldn't touch, and they both knew it. Gerald recovered. He always did. He tossed the card back onto the table. "I don't care if you produced every album on the Billboard chart. They're trespassing. Police are on the way. And when they get here, your little discovery project is over." He turned back to Brenda, leaned in close. "We dealt with this before, remember? Last year. That guitar player." Brenda flinched. Gerald smiled. Same thing, same result. Handle it. He walked back to table 4, sat down, picked up his scotch, and waited for the sirens. Craig Whitmore walked through the front door 30 seconds later. Younger version of his father. Same jaw, same walk, same look on his face like the room owed him something. He co-owned the building. Gerald had given him a 15% stake on his 30th birthday. Tonight, that stake was a weapon. Craig scanned the room, saw the twins on stage, saw Dominic in the corner, saw the phones still recording. He walked straight to Brenda. "What's the situation?" Brenda's voice was tight. "Police are on their way." Craig nodded. "Good. And kill whatever's left on that soundboard. I don't want them touching that mic again." For a moment, it looked like it was over. Craig was at the bar, arms crossed, waiting for the police. Brenda had her phone like a shield. Gerald sat at table 4, swirling his scotch with the patience of a man who had already won. Then a chair scraped at table 12. Lorraine Adams stood up. She smoothed the front of her blouse and turned to face the room the way a woman who had commanded lecture halls for 30 years turns to face a room. "My name is Lorraine Adams. I taught vocal performance at Virginia Commonwealth University for 3 decades. I have coached hundreds of singers." She paused, looked at the twins. "What I just heard is something I have encountered maybe 3 times in my entire career. 3 times. In 30 years. If you silence them tonight, you are not protecting this restaurant. You are robbing it." Gerald opened his mouth. Lorraine didn't let him. "I'm not finished, sir. I've listened to you talk over your steak every Friday for 2 years. I have never once heard you say anything worth hearing. These 2 children have said more in 4 minutes than you've said in 6 years. A gasp near the bar. Gerald's face went dark red. Lorraine sat down and picked up her wine glass. The silence was heavy, the kind where a room decides which side it's on. A man at the bar broke it. "Let them sing." A woman at table 6 stood, grabbed her purse. "If those kids leave, we leave." Her husband stood with her. A young guy in the back held up his phone. "I've been streaming this for 6 minutes. 1,400 people watching. You really want to arrest 2 kids on a live feed?" One voice becomes 2. 2 becomes 6. 6 becomes half the room. Dominic Calloway walked to the stage, not in front of the twins, beside them, close enough that anyone who wanted to touch the kids would have to go through him first. Lorraine joined him. Standing together, Dominic said something quietly, not to the room, to her. "I come here once a year. Same booth, same night. My daughter used to sit across from me. She loved to sing. Passed 6 years ago. She was about their age." Lorraine touched his arm, didn't say a word. Dominic looked at the twins. "She would have loved these 2. Nobody heard it, but it transformed Dominic from a producer helping strangers into a father who lost something sacred and just found its echo in 2 voices the world had thrown away. The front door opened. Officer Dale Wilson stepped inside. 12 years on the Richmond PD, he'd answered disturbance calls at restaurants before. Always the same. Someone management wanted gone. He scanned the room. Twins on stage. Dominic and Lorraine beside them. Half the room on its feet. Phones recording. Gerald at table 4 looking like a man whose steak had been taken. He stopped in front of Talia. "You 2 the ones causing trouble?" "We sang a song, sir, that's all." Wilson looked at the crowd, looked at Gerald, red-faced, rigid, looked at Brenda, eyes on the floor, turned back to Talia. "Doesn't look like trouble to me," Gerald erupted. "Officer, they are trespassing. I am the building owner. I want them removed." Wilson looked at him, long, slow. "Sir, I see 2 young people in a room full of folks who seem glad they're here. Unless there's an actual crime, I'm not removing anybody." Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Craig grabbed his arm. Gerald shook him off, but it was done. The police had come, and the police had chosen the twins. Dominic leaned toward Talia, quiet enough that only she and Tobias could hear. "You've got one more in you?" Tobias opened the notebook, turned to the last page. His hands trembled. Talia read the title. Her eyes filled. Noise. Their mother wrote it 2 weeks before she died. The last song Denise Fletcher ever put on paper. Tobias placed the notebook on the stand. Talia wiped her eyes, and the room held its breath. Nobody in that restaurant knew what was about to happen. They thought the standing ovation was the climax. They thought two homeless kids singing a cappella after getting their mic cut was as good as the story got. They were wrong. Tobias stood at the music stand, the notebook open to the last page. His mother's handwriting, smaller here, shakier, like the hand holding it was running out of time. The title, Noise, written by Denise Fletcher, dated October 3rd, 2 weeks before she died. She never sang it, never hummed it, wrote it in a single night and closed the notebook forever. Talia found it 3 days after the funeral. She read it once and couldn't finish. They had never performed it, not on a street corner, not in the shelter hallway. The song was too close to the wound. Tonight was the night. Tobias didn't start with a hum this time. He started with words. His voice, the voice that stuttered through everyday conversation, the voice that most people mistook for shyness, opened up and poured into the silence like something that had been caged for 19 years. Baritone, rich, deep as a river at night. The quiet twin, the one Gerald called her little brother like he was furniture. That voice filled every corner of Colton's Grill. The first verse was about a woman who sang in empty churches and half-full buses. A woman told her whole life that she was background noise, not the main act, just the voice behind the voice. Tobias sang it like he was talking to her, like she was standing right there. Then Talia came in. She didn't harmonize, she echoed. Each line Tobias sang, Talia answered a half-beat later. Same words, same melody, shifted, like a shadow arriving just after the body that cast it. Two voices having a conversation across time, a son calling out, a daughter answering. A man at table 3 put his head in his hands. A woman at the bar turned away because she didn't want anyone to see her face. The second verse hit harder. It was about doors, doors that close before you reach them, doors that lock when they hear you coming. Doors that don't say, no blacks allowed anymore, but mean exactly the same thing. Tobias's voice cracked on the word welcome. Not from weakness, from memory. The most honest sound anyone in that room had ever heard. Talia caught him. Her voice slid underneath his, lifted the note, carried it forward. The way she'd been carrying him for 14 months. The way he'd been carrying her. Then the bridge. Unison. Same word, same moment, same breath. Still here, still singing, still here. Their mother's phrase, threaded through both songs. A bridge between the first thing she wrote for them and the last. Then the chorus. Talia took it alone. Tobias stepped back, let his sister stand at the edge of the stage with nothing and deliver the line their mother wrote in the last weeks of her life. They called us noise, but we became the song. She didn't shout it. She sang it the way you say something you've known your whole life but never had the courage to speak out loud. Quiet, certain, unbreakable. Gerald's opening insult. Street rats, trained monkeys, go howl on a sidewalk. Noise. Denise Fletcher wrote the answer before the question was ever asked. Years before her children walked into this restaurant, she already knew. She'd lived it her entire life, and she put the response in a notebook and trusted her children to deliver it at exactly the right moment. The final chorus was both of them, full voice, no holding back. Talia held the last note alone, 8 seconds, eyes closed, fists at her sides, her mother's words in her mouth, her mother's fight in her chest. Then she let it go. Silence, the kind that sits on your chest and doesn't let you breathe. A chair scraped. Officer Dale Wilson stood, removed his hat, held it against his chest, eyes red. He looked at the twins for a long moment. Then, quietly, the way a man speaks when he's trying not to break, "My wife used to sing that melody. She passed 3 years ago. She would have loved you too." He put his hat on, turned to Gerald Whitmore. "Mr. Whitmore, I think it's time for you to leave the restaurant." The room erupted. Shouts, fists in the air. Every single person on their feet, phones held high, a woman screaming, "Yes!" Lorraine Adams at table 12, tears on her face, clapping so hard her rings clicked together. Dominic Calloway stood in the corner booth, not clapping, smiling. A small, private smile. The smile of a man who came to remember what he lost and found what he'd been looking for. Gerald sat at table 4, still. Craig pulling at his arm. "Dad, let's go, it's over." Gerald watched the room. Every person who had laughed at his joke 20 minutes ago was now standing for the 2 kids he tried to erase. He looked smaller than he had all night. He looked exactly the right size. Gerald Whitmore left Colton's Grill at 9:22 p.m.
He didn't say goodbye.
Didn't settle his tab. He grabbed his jacket and walked to the door with Craig 2 steps behind. The room parted for them, not with fear, but with silence. The kind of silence a room gives someone it no longer respects. At the door, Gerald stopped, turned, opened his mouth like he had one last thing to say. But every phone was still up. Every face was watching. He closed his mouth and walked out. Brenda Sullivan stood behind the bar, alone. She looked at a room full of customers who had just watched her choose the wrong side. She untied her apron, walked to the back office, didn't speak to anyone. Dominic Calloway walked to the stage, stopped in front of the twins. "Sit with me." They followed him to the corner booth, the booth where his daughter used to sit. Talia slid in across from him, Tobias beside her, the notebook flat on the table between them. Dominic didn't start with compliments. He said, "Who wrote those songs?" "Our mother," Talia said quietly. "Backup singer, gospel circuits. She never got a deal." Dominic nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 folded documents. Recording contracts. Calloway Sound Records. He'd had them ready since the phone call during the first performance. Fair royalty split. Full creative control stays with you. He looked at both of them. "Your mother wrote those songs. You're going to make sure the world hears them." Talia read the first page, slow, careful. She looked up. "Why us?" 23 years in this industry, 10,000 voices. I've never heard what I heard tonight. He paused. "Your mother knew what she put in you. She just didn't live long enough to show the world." Talia looked at Tobias. He nodded once. They signed. Lorraine Adams walked over from table 12, set a napkin in front of Talia, her phone number and one sentence. "Your mother gave you the instrument. Let me help you tune it. Free coaching, pro bono, for as long as they needed." Talia couldn't speak. She pressed her lips together and nodded. Hannah Moore found them 20 minutes later. She sat at the edge of the booth, pulled out her phone, and showed them what she'd been recording all night. Not the performance. Gerald's face when he ordered Brenda to cut the sound. Brenda's hand on the switch. Gerald's words, every one of them. Craig walking in saying, "Kill whatever's left on that soundboard." All of it, clear as daylight. "I'm posting this tonight," Hannah said, "if that's okay with you." Talia looked at the screen, looked at her brother. "Post it." The video went up at 10:14 p.m. By midnight, 200,000 views. By Saturday morning, 1.4 million. By Sunday, it was national news. The internet dug. Gerald's name surfaced, his properties, his donations that looked generous on paper and meant nothing in practice. Then the other stories came. A black street musician named Calvin Davis posted his own video. 1 year ago, Gerald had him banned from the block for playing guitar on Carey Street, threatened him with arrest, called him things Calvin wouldn't repeat on camera. 800,000 views in 12 hours. A pattern, not a single incident, a system. Gerald's business partners issued a joint statement Monday morning, severing all ties with Whitmore Properties. 2 commercial tenants broke their leases by Wednesday. Gerald's social capital, the handshakes, the Friday tables, the knowing nods, collapsed in 5 days. Brenda Sullivan was fired within 48 hours. Pastor Edwin Brooks got the call Saturday morning. Dominic told him everything. Brooks stood in the shelter hallway, the same hallway where the twins sang every morning, and wept. I always told them their mama gave them those voices for a reason. Colton's Grill announced a change 2 weeks later. Every Friday, the small stage would host community performance night. Open to anyone. No audition, no dress code. The empty stage would never be empty again. 6 months later, Talia and Tobias Fletcher released their debut single. The song was called Noise. The album was called Still Here, produced by Dominic Calloway, vocal coaching by Lorraine Adams. The dedication on the inside cover. For Denise Fletcher, who never stopped singing, and for every voice that was told to be quiet. The cover photo was taken at Colton's Grill. Same stage, same corner. Same room where a man in a $200 tie called two teenagers trash. The leather notebook open on the music stand between them. The single hit 4 million plays in 2 days, 11 million by the end of the month. A writer at Rolling Stone called the chorus, "They called us noise, but we became the song, the lyric of the year." Nobody argued. Pastor Edwin Brooks played the single on a portable speaker in the shelter hallway. The same hallway. The same cinder block walls. Residents gathered. When the song ended, nobody moved. Brooks wiped his eyes and said, "That's what happens when you don't give up on the thing God put inside you." Hannah Moore quit Colton's Grill. Dominic hired her as a production assistant at Callaway Sound. On a Friday night in October, 1 year later, a teenager walked into Colton's Grill. 15, nervous, underdressed, standing in the entrance the same way the twins had stood. The new manager smiled. "You here for community night? Stage is all yours." She walked to the mic. The room went quiet. Not because anyone told them to, because they remembered what happened the last time someone unexpected stood on that stage. She opened her mouth, and the room listened. Every single person. Because Talia and Tobias Fletcher taught this restaurant something Gerald Whitmore never could. That the most extraordinary sounds come from the people you least expect. If you were sitting in that restaurant when the speakers got cut, would you have stayed silent, or would you have stood up? Tell me in the comments. And go back and watch the fork drop. Watch Dominic's other hand. He's not reaching for a napkin. He's reaching for his phone. Most people miss it the first time. If this story hit you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications.
Gerard Whitmore cut the speakers. He thought that would end it, but you can't silence a voice that was never asking for permission. Denise Fletcher never got a record deal, never heard her name on the radio. She spent her whole life being told she was background noise, just a backup singer in churches nobody remembered. But she wrote everything down, every song, every word, in a notebook she trusted to her children. And 2 weeks before she died, she wrote one line, "They called us noise, but we became the song." She wrote the answer before her kids ever faced the question. 11 million people heard it because Talia and Tobias didn't sing to prove Gerard wrong. They sang because their mother taught them, "Your voice doesn't belong to you. It belongs to whoever needs to hear it." And that's the thing I can't stop thinking about. What if Denise had given up? What if she never opened that notebook? How many songs die every day inside people who were told to be quiet? If you were in that restaurant when the speakers went dead, would you have stood up or stayed comfortable? Tell me in the comments. And if someone in your life was told their voice doesn't matter, share this with them. Like, subscribe, hit that bell. Next story, a janitor gets humiliated at a school board meeting. They didn't know he'd been recording everything for 3 years. Some people are noise, some people became the song.